All right. Well, it's like 6 degrees of separation, but narrowing it down to 2. All right. So good afternoon, everyone. We'll start with Manjushri. Yeah, praise to Manjushri. Don't hold back, Chuki. We will start with that. Apparently, I've closed the file. Just a second. Obeisance to my Guru and Protector Manjushri holds at his heart a scriptural text embodied of his things, all things as they are, whose understanding and thought is the sun unclouded by defilements or traces of ignorance, who teaches in 60 ways with a patient love of Father for his only Son. All creatures caught in the prison of samsara, confused in the darkness of their ignorance, overwhelmed by their suffering. Yours was dragon-thoughted proclamation of the Dharma arises from the stupefied illusions and frees us from the iron chains of our karma, whose powerful sword of wisdom hews out sufferings wherever its sprouts appear, clearing away the darkness of all ignorance. Our intuition with Manjushri, princely body is adorned with the 112 marks of Buddha, who has completed the 10 stages, achieving the highest perfection of a Bodhisattva, who has been pure from the beginning. On Manjushri, O loving one, with the brilliance of your wisdom, illuminate the darkness and close in my mind, enlighten my intelligence and wisdom, so I might gain insight into the Buddha's words and the texts that explain them. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the highest assembly. From the accumulations that I collect by listening to the teachings, may I attain the state of a Buddha to be able to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the highest assembly. From the accumulations that I collect by listening to the teachings, may I attain the state of a Buddha to be able to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the highest assembly. From the accumulations that I collect by listening to the teachings, may I attain the state of a Buddha to be able to benefit all sentient beings. All right, so who's from the south and who's from the north? Yours from the south, north. All right, well. Is the what, sorry? Oh yeah, rivalry. Well, why not? You know, if we can be divisive as human beings, why not? Yeah, yeah, just go. Yeah, just go with it. Go with the flow. All right. So we had an interesting discussion with Geshe-la towards the end of the session about self-cherishing versus self-grasping. And I thought that we could begin our session today with looking at that and looking at pros and cons, different arguments around it. I think that it's good to look at different arguments around it so that each and every one of us can reach our own conclusion with respect to what position we hold, but also it's not just about holding a position, regardless of what the position you hold. If you come up with your own reasoning for holding this position, you then understand better what self-cherishing is, what self-grasping is, what you need to do in relation to these two. And also, I think that probably you can also then appreciate the positions of others and also see why they're holding their position. Right, so it's not that in this discussion we have to have necessarily a winner or a loser, right? It's more like how can I understand the position of other and find faults in their position in order to develop my own way of thinking. So I had a discussion about it yesterday with Khenso Rinpoche, with Geshe-la Steering. we had a discussion today with Geshe-la, and also during the break, I was having a discussion with Geshe Jiaming, who is now in China. So I think that still Geshe Jiaming and Geshe Tashering are in one camp. Their position is different to Geshe Tsultrim's position. Geshe Tsultrim's position is similar to the general position of Drepung Losanding position, and I suppose that there are also others that hold this position. So we have a few ideas, and when we understand the complexity of these two ideas, we can benefit from that. Now, it just reminds me that when Geshe Jiaming and I came here to Australia, Geshe Tashering was here for, I think, already 15 years or 18 years. During all those years, there has been only one teacher here at the center. And, he's a very powerful and charismatic person, very outgoing, very funny, and also very strong. So I think that people here and elsewhere were not used to a variety of positions or ideas. So Geshe Jiaming came, and both of them come from a tradition of debate. So you have a certain position presented to you, and it might be the position of your monastery, but it's not necessarily that you accept it just because your teacher says so, or just because this is what your monastery believe. You attack this position and see whether this position, if you try to find fault in that, whether you can still hold it. So this is what it was doing to some of the positions that Geshe Tashering was presenting. And some of the people in the audience started to get very agitated, kind of. So I think that probably, sometimes we like things to be kept simple, just to have one view, one positions to go along with that, and not to have other points of view. So when Geshe Jiaming started to, every once in a while, to present other points of view, some people got angry. They said that this is really disrespectful to Geshe Tashering, this is not the way to go, and so on and so forth. And Geshe Jiaming was pretty amused because, in some sense, you can say that it's not I guess that a shit stirrer is not it's not the right term for a Geshe, but he liked to sometimes poke people and say, don't just accept positions because you were told so, just think about them. So he used to present some other positions, and then and I remember that one day somebody came up to me and said that Geshe Tashering is my teacher, and therefore his view is correct, and therefore Geshe Jiaming's position is false, and therefore I don't respect him. Just that's what she said. I was kind of giggling to myself. I thought myself, this is kind of going too far with that. I mean, it's not kind of necessarily that it's not that we have to get into those arguments and take, choose a camp. It's more like, just think about it. If you don't believe in a certain position, if you don't accept it, let it go. So the question was that we start off with this morning was trying to identify what self-cherishing is. So often when we identify what a certain state of mind is, we look at what it observes, what it focuses on, and also what is the aspect of this state of mind. What is the mode of apprehension? Like, for example, if I meditate on love for all sentient beings, then I focus on all sentient beings. That's my object of observation. More precisely, suffering sentient being. This is my object of observation. And the aspect is wishing them to be free from suffering. How wonderful it would be if they would be free from suffering, right? So the focal object is suffering sentient being. The aspect is wishing them to be free from suffering. With selflessness, for example, I focus on the self. The aspect is not existing inherently, not existing from its own side, not existing by way of its own characteristics and so forth. I mean, here I start to dig my own grave, because you could come up with different debates about it. So I'll quickly transition to another example before you do so. With impermanence, I can say that, for example, I can focus on Sherab, that's my object of observation, and the aspect would be changing from moment to moment. And that would be the impermanence of shareable, share of being an impermanent person. It depends upon how I express that, right? Either share of being an impermanent person or the impermanence of Sherab. Anyway, so that's the business with focal object and the aspect of focal object in the mode of apprehension. So the question was, what's the focal object of cherishing oneself? What is the aspect? What is the mode of apprehension? Now, why am I asking this question? First of all, because we speak about it quite a lot, about the aspect and the object of observation with respect to grasping at a self, selflessness, impermanence, grasping at permanence, and so forth. We speak, or compassion, anger, patience, and so forth. We speak about it quite a lot with respect to those consciousnesses. It's not that clear with respect to self-cherishing. It's quite interesting, actually, where from the Mahayana perspective, that's one of the main enemies, cherishing oneself. But it seems that there is no, at least I haven't come across a text that was very clear in delineating what's the focal object and what's the aspect of cherishing oneself. So because of that, you see that also Geshe Tashring, Geshe Jaman, Geshe Tsultrim have different positions. So it's interesting that it hasn't been really spoken of in text, or maybe it has. Anyway, I'm saying that also because when we look at some of the prayers that we do, some of the texts that we study, where is it? All right. All right. So in the Guru Puja, in verse LC 91, it says, this chronic disease of cherishing myself is the cause giving rise to my unsought suffering. Perceiving this, I seek blessings to blame begrudge and destroy the monstrous demon of grasping at the self. Now, the English translation in the book says the monstrous demon of selfishness, but actually the Tibetan says grasping at a self. So here it says that the chronic disease is cherishing myself, but what I need in order to eliminate that is to destroy grasping at a self. So that's one interesting thing to point out. Verse 134 in our text says, if whatever harm, fear, and suffering in the world all arise from grasping at the self, then what is that great ghost to me? So it comes in the section of, let's see where it is in the outline, but today we discuss the faults of cherishing ourselves, right? So here, instead of mentioning cherishing oneself greatly, here it comes under the section of the reasonableness of discarding self-cherishing as part of the reasonableness of discarding self-cherishing. So, so how suitable it is to do that, here it says that what we should do is deal with our self-grasping attitude. All arise from grasping at the self. So grasping at the self is grasping at ourself as if we exist independently, in and of ourselves, from our own side, inherently, truly, many different ways of expressing that. So because there are those cross references between the two, we want to develop an understanding of how they work together and whether we can separate them out or whether they mean exactly the same thing. So Geshe Tashring and Geshe Jaman, both of them say, first of all, with respect to what is the observed object and what is the aspect. Again, none of them said it in a precise way, to be honest. Kind of they spoke about it in general. They said that as for cherishing myself, the focal object is myself. Now, with respect to the aspect, how it operates, what is the mode of apprehension, here it is kind of expressed in a variety of ways, kind of not absolutely precise, but it's okay. Not everything has to be written down in precise words. So they say, I think, things that are quite similar to what we said yesterday. So Geshe Tashring said at some point yesterday, he said, it's focusing on myself and thinking my happiness, my suffering, and putting an emphasis on oneself. I spoke with Geshe Jaman today, and he said, well, it's not only putting the emphasis on oneself, but also thinking my suffering or my happiness are more important than others, or more significant than others. You know, in that sense, we take a self as primary and others are secondary. So it's quite similar to what we said yesterday, right? So yesterday at the beginning of our session, we said that if we were to describe cherishing a self in a general way, we would say that considering self to be more important than others, my suffering comes first, or my happiness comes first. That's what self-cherishing is, seeing yourself as being more important than others. So that's Geshe and Geshe-Shaman's position. Now, Geshe Tsultrim today said something else. It's focusing on oneself, so that's the same focal object. The aspect, he says, surprisingly, is existing from one's own side. Put it on my class notes. I'll distribute that today. At least I'll try to remember to do so. Which reminds me, by the way, that I just remembered that I haven't set an exam. Kind of I started doing it, but I forgot completely to finish that off. Yeah, anytime. All right, maybe next year. So I'll do it at the end of this week. I'm sorry, apologize for everyone. Well, he says so. I think that today he said that the root of grasping, of cherishing oneself, is grasping at a self. That's the root. That's the foundation. So kind of, and on that basis, we had, therefore, my suffering comes first, or my suffering is more important. You know, so the root of that is grasping at a self, and from that, as a result, comes self-cherishing. Yeah, so when self existing, grasping at oneself as existing from one's own side is the same as grasping at itself. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So then I started to debate it with Geshe Tsultrim and said that if you say that the focal object of self-cherishing oneself, the mode of apprehension, is existing from one's own side, you're not distinguishing between grasping at a self and self-cherishing. So Geshe said that there are different types of self-cherishing, self-grasping. So he didn't elaborate on that, but when I think about what it means and what implications you can draw from what he says, then first of all, we can say that there are, so all he says, is it useful to mention two types of grasping at the eye, innate and intellectually acquired self-grasping? So that's an excellent point, because I wanted to say something which is not what you said. So that's one type. So that's an excellent point to make. That's two types, innate and intellectually acquired. Then you have different levels. You have coarse and subtle. Those are different types of grasping at the self, but then Geshe Tsultrim went a step further. Rather than speaking of intellectually acquired or different, kind of coarse and subtle, or you have grasping at self-sufficient, substantially existing, grasping at permanent, unitary, and independent, grasping an inherently existing self. There are different types of self. It went further than that and says that from the point of view of what qualifies, what is combined with grasping at a self, you can also say that there are different types. So he says that grasping at a self, which is also self-grasping, is grasping at I as if I exist by way of my own characteristics, that is qualified by, therefore, wishing for myself to be happy, as if it's more important than others, wishing for myself to be free from suffering, as if this is more important than others. So he didn't say it exactly in these words, but because he said it just briefly in our debate, but I think that this is what he was getting at, right? So from the point of view of what qualifies grasping at a self, you can also speak about different types. which is more akin to self-cherishing. Well, this is what he said. He said that this type of grasping in the self is actually self-cherishing. And I think that there's a basis for what he says, because when you look at, for example, the supplement to the Middle Way, which explains 3 types of compassion at the beginning of the text. So it mentions compassion observing sentient beings, compassion observing phenomena, and compassion observing the unapprehendable. And these are all types of compassion, but they differ from the point of view of what qualifies or what is combined with that compassion. So compassion which observes mere sentient beings, suffering sentient beings, is the first type of compassion. Compassion that observes phenomena is compassion that is qualified by sentient beings which are impermanent, changing from moment to moment. Right, so that's the second type of compassion. The third type of compassion is compassion observing the unapprehendable, which is compassion to sentient beings in understanding that they lack inherent existence. There is that nice description in Chandrakirti's text in which he explains how sentient beings are like a bucket in a well because of the view of the perishing collection, which is grasping at the self. I think that this is mine. I'll switch it off. So because of the view of the perishing collection, which is grasping at the self, they cycle again and again in samsara like a bucket traveling in the world by a pulley mechanism. Anyway, so just as there are different types of compassion that differ from the point of view of what qualifies them, Geshe Tsultrim's, it seems that his position was there is grasping at the self, which is a type of, which becomes, self-cherishing. So you can say self-cherishing, which is a type of grasping at the self. And it becomes self-cherishing because it grasps at itself, but also with that with being qualified with a consciousness that thinks that therefore my happiness is more important than others. Oh, all right, cool. And therefore Geshe says, at some point he said, if it is self-cherishing, it is necessarily grasping at the self. If it's grasping at the self, it's not necessarily self-cherishing. Well, is there self-cherishing that exists in a non-grasping way? I would say no, but the other one is kind of the other one is possible. So according kind of to, I'll say it again. If it is self-cherishing, it is necessarily grasping at itself, which means that any type of self-cherishing would necessarily be also self-grasping. But if it's self-grasping, it's not necessarily self-cherishing. So, for example, you could have self-grasping in the mind stream of bodhisattvas. So bodhisattvas on the Mahayana path, they've developed great compassion. They cherish other sentient beings more than they cherish themselves. But when we consider ordinary bodhisattvas on the path of accumulation, on the path of preparation, they still have ignorance. They haven't abandoned the ignorance, any form of ignorance. Therefore, they're grasping at the self. The grasping at the self in their continuum is grasping at the self, but it is not together with self-cherishing. So that's Geshe Tsultrim's position. So that being the case, we can draw a few conclusions from that. To begin with, is if self-cherishing is a type of self-grasping, is it a wrong consciousness? So is there a way of self-grasping wherein the motivation behind it is the benefit of others or cherish others? Yes, kind of. You could have bodhisattvas on their initial paths, the path of accumulation and the path of preparation. So this, so you could have, first of all, bodhisattvas that believe in different philosophical views. So you could have bodhisattvas that believe in the viewpoint of lower schools of thought within Buddhist philosophies, which are non-Madhyamika Prasangika school of thought. So you can have bodhisattvas which are mind-only bodhisattvas, which believe in the positions of the Vaibhashika or Satantrika school of thought. So in terms of bodhicitta, they want to become enlightened, for the sake of all sentient beings. Instead, in terms of the philosophical views, from the viewpoint of the middle way consequence school of thought, the Prasangika school, they still not only have ignorance, but they still strongly grasp it an inherently existing person, because this is their philosophical view. So that's in general. But also even bodhisattvas which are prasangika bodhisattvas, which means that they believe in the view of the middle way consequence school of thought, when they're still on the path of accumulation and on the path of preparation, they might have realized the right view of emptiness, but they haven't abandoned the ignorance yet. So they still have grasping at the self. They start abandoning ignorance only from the path of seeing onwards. So what happens is that they're on the path of accumulation, the path of preparation. They could have realized emptiness of the self, so that strong manifest forms of that do not arise, but it doesn't mean that they don't have it. They still have it, because the seeds of that are still present. They will start to eliminate the seeds of that only once they get to the next path, which is the path of seeing, from the path of seeing onwards. So then, to summarize my answer, yes. Your question was, could you have those that are grasping at a self without cherishing themselves? Yes. For example, bodhisattvas on the path of accumulation or bodhisattvas on the path of preparation. So according to Geshe Tsultrim's position, saying that self-cherishing is a type of self-grasping. So is self-cherishing a wrong consciousness? Yes. It is a wrong consciousness because? Yeah, I think that you could say it is wrong consciousness because it is a self-grasping. Yeah, I mean, you can add all the things that you said because it's grasping an inherently existing self. You can add that, but in order to keep it short, you can say that it is a wrong consciousness because it's grasping at a self. Grasping at a self is necessarily a wrong consciousness. So Jason is asking, are we always grasping at a self, and is it manifest all the time or not manifest all the time until we directly realize emptiness? So so long as we're in samsara for that long, we have grasping at the self. The way to get out of samsara is to eliminate grasping at the self. So we have two forms of grasping at the self, the intellectually acquired one and the innate one. In terms of the root of samsara, the innate grasping at the self, and even more specifically, the innate view of the perishing collection, you could say, is the root of samsara. So long as we haven't eliminated the view of the perishing collection, which is a type of grasping at the self, for that long we will still stay in samsara. The question is it always manifest? It's not always manifest. For example, so you're right about saying that it's not always manifest with a clear light mind. Yeah, with a mind that realizes emptiness. So if you have a mind that realizes emptiness, according to the middle way consequence school of thought, emptiness of inherent existence, which is a mind realizing selflessness, at the time of having that realization, it is likely that it's not like the manifest form would not be present because they are directly contradictory. They're directly opposite to each other. So So wouldn't it eliminate self-grasping? Well, to eliminate self-grasping, we need to eliminate it together with its seeds. Yeah, so you can have we can have different forms of realizations of emptiness. Like, for example, we begin with correct assumption, which is not like a real realization, but sometimes it is said that it is at the level of realization. So we have studied that, we've contemplated that, we have meditated on that to a certain point until we go to a correct assumption. So I think that when we have the correct assumption present manifestly in our mind, it is likely that manifest grasping at itself will not be present. Even more so, of course, when we realize it conceptually with an inferential cognition, right? So in inferential cognition, realizing selflessness, when that is manifestly present, grasping at itself will not be manifestly present. And needless to say that when we have a perceptual realization of emptiness, it will not be present. Now, when we attain the path of seeing, from the path of seeing and onwards to the path of meditation, our perceptual realization of emptiness eliminates different degrees of grasping at a self, right? So it does that in stages. So you could say that you've eliminated some portion of the seeds, but you still have the subtle seeds present. But still, when you're in meditative equipoise on emptiness, you have no manifest form of grasping at a self. Are there true cessations? So it's the actual true cessation not until you attend the 10th ground. Well, depends on which school of thought you speak about it. But for the sake of our discussion, let's look at the Prasangika school to make it simple. So according to the Prasangika school, the final true cessation in which self-grasping has been eliminated is attained at the same time of attaining the 8th ground, the 8th Bodhisattva ground. So you have on the, when you attain the first ground, you attain what is called an uninterrupted path. The next moment of that on the first ground, the first liberated path, is the time in which you attain the first true cessation in which you've eliminated the intellectually acquired grasping of the self. Then when you move on from the path of seeing to the path of meditation, and you do that when you attain the liberated path, the first liberated path on the path of meditation, this is when you attain the first portion of, you attain a true cessation in which you've eliminated the first portion of innate grasping at the self, but there's still more portions of innate grasping at the self that need to be eliminated. When you have finished eliminating them, you attain the 8th ground, and that's, you could say, the final true cessation or complete true cessation in which all of grasping at the self together with its seeds have been eliminated. The imprints are still there. You eliminate them on the 8th, 9th, and 10th ground. For those of you who are confused about it, or kind of it sounds a bit like a foreign language, don't worry about it. We will speak about it later on, I think, again and again this year and also next year. So it's a kind of thing, it's a kind of lingo that you have to get used to, and at some point, it's no longer foreign language, hopefully. So so we said that according to Geshe Tsultrim's position, self-cherishing is a wrong consciousness. Is it an affliction? Is it an afflictive obscuration? Yes. Yep, it is. People at home, you can also write your answers. Don't kick back and relax. You can also write yes or no. So it is an afflictive obscuration. Therefore, when we think of those who have attained the state of liberation, hears and solitude realizes, do they have self-cherishing in the mind stream? Hears and solitude realize the ahats. Ahats are people that, or practitioners that have attained the state of liberation. Do they have self-cherishing in the mind stream? No. Not according to Geshe Tsultrim. So they don't have self-cherishing in the mind stream because there is no self to grasp it or cherish. Or you can say in short, because they've abandoned self-grasping. Yeah, grasping at a self. No, they have. So, yeah. So here's and solitude realizes have realized emptiness. They've realized emptiness perceptually. We're speaking about here's and solitude realize the ahats. Does that have attained a state of liberation? So there are different schools of thought, different philosophies within Buddhist tenets. But when we look at the middle way consequence school of thought, the Madhyamika Prasanka school of thought, they say that any Arya of the three vehicles, hears, solitude realizes, or Mahayanis, they have necessarily realized emptiness. Not only that, you can say that they've necessarily realized the selfness of phenomena. So from the Prasanka school of thought, hears and solitude realize the ahats, they've realized emptiness, they've realized both selfness of persons and selfness of phenomena, and they've also eliminated afflictive obscurations without exception. According to Geshe Tsultrim, they've also abandoned self-cherishing. Jason is asking, what about the seeds on the mind stream? So here's and solitude realize that ahats have also abandoned the seeds of grasping at the self. They still have the imprints of grasping at the self. So seeds are responsible for producing the next moment of grasping. So for example, I have anger in my mind stream, and also the seeds of anger in my mind stream. So anger as a consciousness is a manifest consciousness in which I'm intent on harming others. I'm wishing to harm someone else. The seeds of anger are producing the next moment of anger. So suppose that now I'm not angry. Actually, I sit here and love you all deeply. Suppose. But yeah, imagine that. Sounds quite fanciful, doesn't it? Anyway, so anger as a consciousness is not present at the moment, but I still have seeds of anger in my mind stream, those potentials that can produce future moments of anger. So more precisely, it says that they produce future moment of a similar type of consciousness. So we have seeds of anger, seeds of attachment, seeds of jealousy, seeds of compassion, seeds of loving kindness, seeds of patience. All of them produce future moments of similar types of consciousnesses. So these are seeds. Well, in Buddhist terminology, we don't use this term unconscious. I think that unconscious that's more of, I guess, Western psychology or psychology in general. So I think that from a Buddhist point of view, we can speak of different levels of consciousness. So we have manifest, we have dormant, and then we have seeds. Now, dormant and seeds, sometimes they are equated and sometimes they're posited slightly different. So for example, in order to make it clear, a manifest consciousness is a consciousness in which me and the person and the consciousness are operating as one. So for example, when I get enraged, then anger becomes strongly manifest in my mind. And also me as a person, I act in unison with anger. No, I'm an enraged person. I can have, at the same moment now, I can have different types of consciousnesses. So for example, I can be meditating on loving kindness, and every once in a while I have kind of this slight interruption wandering to thinking, wandering of the mind to thinking of food or what have you. But still, the one that predominates is compassion or loving kindness. So what manifests is, you could say, loving kindness, me and the consciousness are acting as one. But also I have other consciousnesses that could be operating at the same time, but they're not as strong. So you can say that they're dormant, or even more so, you can say that, for example, I could still have anger to a certain degree that is really weak at the moment. Maybe I'm speaking with you on a particular topic, but also I have a certain irritation going on. But I'm not enraged, I'm just slightly irritated. So what is, if we have, let's say, a conversation about patience, and we're influenced by that, we can say that maybe patience is manifest. And anger, since it's not strongly present, you can say either that it is weak. I'm not sure that you can say that it's dormant. Maybe if it's really weak, you could say that it's dormant. Or you can say that it is in a seed form. The potential is there, but it's not a developed consciousness at the moment. So unconscious, I think that probably sometimes you can say that unconscious could be maybe consciousness to which an object appears without being ascertained. Inattentive awarenesses, in other words, consciousnesses that are really weak, or maybe just seeds of those consciousnesses. So these are seeds, and then we have imprints which are responsible for the appearances that we have that appear to our minds. So for example, all of us have ignorance. We have the seeds of ignorance, which produce a later moment of ignorance of that consciousness. And then we have the imprints which produce the appearance of ignorance, in that, for example, I have ignorance of grasping at a self. Ignorance of grasping as that everything to exist independently. But also this is the appearances that I get to my consciousness. When I look at each and every one of you and everything around me, it appears as if it exists completely in and of itself, independently. So these appearances are produced by my own imprints. So here's in Soito realize that arhats have abandoned ignorance, the seeds of ignorance, but not the imprints. They still have imprints that produce appearances of true existence and such. Always ask, what about deep sleep? In deep sleep, we still have the seeds of the afflictions. Whether we still have grasping at a self as a consciousness manifest, you could definitely have it in dreams. Yeah, in dreams you can. But if you separate deep sleep and dream state, can you create positive or negative karmas in dreams? Yeah, you can create them, but in Lama Tsongkhapa's Lamrim Chenmo, it makes a distinction between actions done but not accumulated. So it says that, for example, actions done in dreams are actions done but not accumulated. What the implication of that is not very clear. That's, I think, subject to debate and discussion. So is it that if you do an action and you don't accumulate that, does it mean that you do not experience the result of that action? So some could say that you don't experience the result of that action, which is a little bit, I think, weird. Or yeah, there wasn't like planning, it's not like intentional or whatever. So when you look at the three parts of an action in general discussion, they say there's the preparatory part, the planning, then there's the actual, then there's the conclusion of the action. So with actions done in dreams, for example, you could have either planning or no planning, but certainly you don't commit them. If you dream of killing someone in a dream, it doesn't mean that you have done the action and the person is dead. You could have kind of done it in a dream. So, you could have planned it in a dream. It could have happened in a dream. And in your dream, you might have even rejoiced that the person has died. But then the person, you wake up from the dream. It's not an action that was done. So when we say that it's an action done but not accumulated, it means that you don't accumulate the real action of killing. It's not that there's no repercussion to that. We still, I guess, experience the result of that karma in one way or another. So maybe you could say that a karma in a dream karma has been accumulated, but it's not the real karma of actually doing that action. Well, does it mean that action done in dreams, it means that you don't carry those actions along with you? Yeah, I think that when we speak about karma done and not accumulated, I think that probably this is what we're getting at. So there was something that happened to you in the dream, but you haven't accumulated the actual action. It doesn't, you don't have the action of killing, for example, placed upon your continuum, and you carry that on your continuum until the point in which you experience the maturation of that action. So you don't carry it with you in that sense. So Jason's saying, I heard that deep sleep is close to the death stage of black neurotainment. Okay, could be. So anyway, making sure that we continue with some of these points. So according to Geshe Tsogyam's position, grasping at a self is an afflictive, self-cherishing is an afflictive obscuration. Is it a wrong consciousness? According to Geshe Tsogyam, yes. Do hearers and Sartre realizes arhats have self-cherishing in the mind stream? No. So does it mean that hearers and Sartre realizes have an other cherishing attitude in the mind stream? Hearers and Sartre realize that arhats. If they've abandoned cherishing themselves, does it necessarily mean that they cherish others? No, not necessarily. Yeah. So you remember Geshe Tsogyam saying that they must have compassion in the mind stream. How could they not have compassion in the mind stream? But it's not uncontrived compassion. It's not great compassion. Yeah, so that's one point to make. So you said, so you began with saying not necessarily. All right. So if not necessarily, first of all, let's say that do we have hearers and Sartre to realize the arhats, which do have great compassion in the mind stream? Sorry? Well, great compassion is, the focal object of great compassion is all sentient beings, suffering sentient beings. So can we have hearers and Sartre to realize the arhats that have great compassion in the mind stream? Then there be bodhisattvas. All right, so I wonder, people at home, what do you think about it? People at home. So Jason is saying yes. So you could have hearers and Sartre to realize that arhats with great compassion in the mind stream. All right, so there could be the following scenario. Also, Terry says yes. So there could be the following scenario. Someone has attained a state of arhatships. They're liberated from samsara. They're not bodhisattva yet because they began with the thought, I will attain the state of liberation for my own sake. I just want to get out of here. Enough is enough. So then they attain the state of arhat. At some point, they understand that it's not enough, that they can go on and become Buddha. To become Buddha, they need to, first of all, generate bodhicitta. To generate bodhicitta, first off, they need uncontrived great compassion. Right? So great compassion comes before bodhicitta. So you could say that there's that intermediate state, so to speak. No, transitional state. There are arhats in transition. So they've attained arhatship. they're working towards developing bodhicitta, they have developed great compassion, and probably soon enough, they will also develop uncontrived bodhicitta, right? Uncontrived great compassion is when kind of they're so moved by compassion, they don't need to think about it with the coarse consciousness. They still need subtle effort, but coarse effort is no longer needed. If they have that, then the mind of an uncontrived mind of enlightenment seems to be just behind the corner. So it can happen. Once they develop uncontrived bodhicitta, uncontrived mind of enlightenment, there are bodhisattvas, there are arhats, but are not hearers or sorry to realize they're arhats, they're just arhats. They're not Mahayana arhats, they're not Hinayana arhats, they're just arhats because they're bodhisattvas. Well, you cannot say that they're, could you say that they're bodhisattva arhats? Well, because they have uncontrived great compassion. Well, the difficulty with that position is that the term Mahayana arhat refers to those that have attained the 8th ground onwards. So a bodhisattva that has that entered the Mahayana path in having attained a state of an arhatship before they enter into the path of accumulation first off. So if you say that that's a bodhisattva arhat, does it mean that you could equate that with a Mahayana arhat? I'm not sure. Yeah, I would tend to say no, but probably we can ask maybe Geshe Tsultrim to clarify that. But they're definitely not Mahayana arhats. So therefore, the next question is, are self-cherishing and cherishing others directly contradictory? In a sense that if I eliminate cherishing myself, do I necessarily develop cherishing others? No. So that's according to Geshe Tsultrim's position, right? Yeah, according to Geshe Tsultrim's position, if we have eliminated our own self-cherishing, it means that we've eliminated grasping at a self. If we've eliminated grasping at a self, we don't have self-cherishing. It doesn't mean yet that we've developed cherishing others because we haven't developed great compassion. The bliss of peace. Yeah, you could be abiding on the bliss of peace. If you're abiding on the bliss of peace, it means that you haven't developed great compassion yet. Yeah. 2 or 4. You mean to like cherishing oneself and to abandon self-cherishing and to develop great compassion? Well, according to this, to Geshe Tsultrim's presentation, yes. Yeah, because according to Geshe Tsultrim's position, if you abandon grasping at a self, you will have abandoned cherishing yourself. It does not necessarily mean that you've meditated on cherishing others, because you could be first of all thinking that I just have to get out of samsara. I need to eliminate self-cherishing. You do that, you've eliminated grasping at the self, but you haven't meditated on compassion for all sentient beings. It's not that you haven't meditated on compassion at all, because here's and sort to realize that arhats still meditate on immeasurable love, loving kindness, and immeasurable compassion. So they have the compassion that they have is likely to be greater than the compassion that we have now as being practitioners or followers of the Mahayana tradition. But still, they haven't developed great compassion at the level of, let's say, the wholehearted resolve in which they think that I will free sentient beings from suffering. So meditating on great compassion will naturally lead to abandoning self-cherishing. Yeah, I'm just repeating the question also for the people at home. So According to Geshe Tsultrim's position, no. If according to Geshe Tsultrim's position, if self-cherishing is a type of self-grasping, the only way to eliminate self-grasping is to realize selflessness. So you might meditate on great compassion for eons on end, but if you know, and you have kind of this such a strong compassion to all living beings, but if you don't realize selflessness, you still have cherishing oneself, which is actually, it's a good point that you made, because now it seems that it's an awkward position. You will kind of, you have great compassion. You still, you know, you still have self-cherishing, self-grasping, because you haven't meditated on selflessness. But then it'd be awkward to say that you also have self-cherishing, because you've meditated on great compassion. It means that you have abandoned self-cherishing without abandoning self-grasping. So if self-grasping is if self-cherishing is a type of self-grasping, how can you eliminate it without having realized selflessness? So you could say that that's a fault in the position of Geshe Tsultrim. You know, so if we debate that with Geshe Tsultrim, that's an excellent point to make. What about those who develop, those that have developed great compassion, but haven't realized selflessness? Do they have self-cherishing in the mind stream? If they don't have self-cherishing, how did they eliminate it without realizing selflessness? Like say Mother Teresa still circling in samsara. Yeah. Yeah, we did say that you could have self-grasping, but not self-cherishing, like bodhisattvas. So how is it different to what I said? Well, I said that we said that you could have bodhisattvas with self-grasping, but not self-cherishing. Like so how is it different? Well, we said that kind of because if you say that self-cherishing is not an affliction, this is now Geshe Jamin and Geshe Tashchiring's position. If you can have self-cherishing, which is not an affliction, it is not a type of grasping at a self, then you can eliminate self-cherishing without eliminating grasping at a self. So you can have bodhisattvas with self-grasping, but without self-cherishing. But if you say that self-cherishing is a type of self-grasping, how can you have bodhisattvas that have great compassion? They don't have self-cherishing, but they still have self-grasping. Yeah. Yeah. Well, because so Sherby is saying that because we said that self-grasping is the root of that. So you can still have self-grasping, but without the self-cherishing that is on top of that. Well, but what about Geshe Tsultrim's position that it is still afflictive obscuration, but not only that, it's focusing on the self and it is apprehending it to exist from its own side. Yeah, you wouldn't get rid of it until the 8th ground. So what about 8th, 9th? Yeah, they don't have self-grasping and therefore they will also not have self-cherishing. I mean, also one thing that we've said before when we studied grunts and parts many years ago was that actually, I'm not going to say it now. I'm going to say it tomorrow because that belongs to Geshe Jamin, Geshe Tsultrim's, Geshe Tashchiring's position. So it's best to look at all the position together so that we don't get confused about it. So today we just spoke about Geshe Tsultrim's position. I think that most of it makes sense. I mean, when you understand his kind of way of thinking, And also when you think of, I'm not just saying that it makes sense when you understand the way of thinking, it also has some support in the verses that we read from the Guru Puja and from what Shantideva says. So this chronic disease of cherishing myself is the cause giving rise to my unsought suffering. Perceiving this, I seek your blessings to blame, the grudge to destroy this monstrous demon of grasping at the self. So that's one support for Geshe Tsunrim's position. The second is verse 134. They all arise from grasping at the self, right? So if whatever harm, fear, and suffering in this world all arise from grasping at the self, then what uses that great goes to me. And that comes under the section of, therefore, ridding yourself of self-cherishing. So this is what we've done today. Tomorrow, I think that tomorrow we'll just look at the other positions with respect to grasping at the self. I will also send these class notes to you guys. Another thing that I did at home today, and we can do it probably quickly tomorrow, is just to come up with a summary that separates out what are the disadvantages of cherishing oneself and what are the benefits of cherishing others. It's good to have this lit kind of Shantideva in his verses is in each verse, each one of the verses that we've covered today, it combines it to it. The first two lines are maybe a drawback. The last two lines are the benefits, right, of cherishing oneself versus cherishing others. So I think that just for the sake of our meditation, when you think of all the drawbacks of cherishing oneself, it's good to have one exhaustive list at your disposal. And then the benefits of cherishing others, another list, makes it easier in some sense. All right. Thank you very much, peeps. Let's leave it here for now. Thank you. Due to this virtue, may quickly become a Guru Buddha and lead all transparent greater beings without exception to that state. May the precious Supreme Bodhicitta not yet born arise. May that arisen not incline, but increase more and more. In the land encircled by snowy mountains, you are the source of all happiness and good, all powerful and residence in Gyatso. Please remain until samsara ends. You uphold the Sibyura's moral way of selves and bountiful bearer of all, sustaining, preserving, and spreading Marjuna's victorious doctrine, who masterfully accomplishes magnificent prayers honoring the three jewels, protecting of myself and others, your disciples. Please live long. Thank you. And I think that it's, as Venerable Chukyi mentioned, I read your email only this afternoon. So we have Kopan Monastery is deeply affected by COVID-19. So Geshe Sopa and some of his students have been doing some prayers for the sake of the infected people. I guess that we can include not only people at Kopan Monastery in the nunnery, but also everyone else. Yeah, and all the people involved. So it's good also to, I guess, include them in our dedication every day at home when you do your prayers, or also here. Yeah.